For the record, it would be to initiate committee-level investigations. It would be on Harry Reid and John Boehner in their respective chambers to
Right.
initiate those processes. Is that right?
Yeah, although you could do it. I mean, the most likely real investigation that would come about would be the House Judiciary Committee, because you've got Jim Sensenbrenner, who feels like he was lied to. You've got people like John Conyers and Jerry Nadler, who for years have been fighting this issue and never stopped fighting it, even when Obama took it over. And you've seen Bob Goodlatte, who's the chair of that committee. He voted against Amash Conyers. He was originally somewhat supportive of this program, but if you watch him over the 7-month period these leaks have gone on, he's really evolved in very important ways. The other person on the committee to keep an eye on there is Zoe Lofgren, partly because she represents Silicon Valley, who has lots of economic concerns with this, but she's always been good on these issues as well. And I think she will continue to be a leader as well. And so you've got the House Judiciary Committee that does have a legitimate claim to oversee these programs. They do have, I think, a pretty clear majority on that committee at this point who support some kind of change and some kind of investigation. And so you might see, I mean, John Conyers was able to use the committee to investigate certain things that Bush had done. You could see a similar kind of energy out of that committee now. And with the advantage that, unlike John Conyers' efforts in 2006, right now the committee has a bipartisan, what I believe to be a bipartisan majority interested in addressing these issues.
You're saying they could initiate an investigation of this subject, the NSA reform subject, however you want to articulate it. They could initiate that. That's what you're saying.
I think I mean, they would have to fight to get certain information, but by law, I mean, one of the things that happened was the government has claimed over and over that Congress was informed about these programs, and what they mean is that the intelligence committees were informed about these programs. But one thing that was passed with the 2008 FISA Amendments Act was a law that basically said you have to give important FISA decisions, including on the Patriot Act programs. You have to give them to both the intelligence and the judiciary committees. So that established in a way that really hadn't been established, or that both the Obama and Bush administrations have been trying to disclaim. That established a real jurisdictional interest for the judiciary committees in a way that the intelligence committees would like it to exist just for the intelligence committee. So in other words, they do have a bit of a claim to be able to say, you need to give us these documents. They've had to fight to get them. One of the reasons I raised Zoe Lofgren is she did something remarkable a couple weeks ago and actually brought in Bruce Schneier, the security expert who's seen the Snowden documents in raw form. And she brought him in to brief, and it was a bipartisan group. It was six congresspersons, herself, two other members of the Judiciary Committee as Democrats, Bob Goodlatte. There was a Democrat from the House Intelligence Committee, which is really fascinating because the implication is he doesn't know, he's not learning everything about the NSA on the Intelligence Committee, which is telling, but we know they're not saying everything about 12.3 to 33. And then Justin Amash, who's been a leader from the Republican side on the House side. So in other words, with these leaks, with these documents, you have means of going around Intelligence Committee stonewalling. And the House Judiciary Committee clearly does have oversight authority over the FBI, right? So because they have they oversee DOJ, and so you could get pretty far with an HJC study, I think. And they've got a panel coming up. I forget whether it was next week or the following week, and we'll see what the tone is. We'll see how aggressive Bob Goodlatte is, because if he really wants to push this, he has the authority to push it, and he's got, I think, a bipartisan majority on his committee supporting him.
Mm-hmm. Part of the Resolution 400, which initiated the Senate Intelligence Committee, there's a component of it that I've read about that provides people like Wyden and Udall the ability to declassify materials. information. And I'm wondering, I might be asking the obvious, the answer might be very obvious, but I just want to ask it. Why haven't people like them been more aggressive about declassification?
Because they need the rest of their committee. You know, I'm actually, I have to say, I'm fairly lonely on this, but I'm actually fairly sympathetic. People always say, why doesn't Wyden just read some of these documents into the congressional record? You know, going back to the Pentagon Papers precedent there with Mike Gravel. And I think there is value to having somebody like Wyden who, and I don't know how he's done this, frankly. And frankly, both he and Mark Udall must be clean as a whistle because, you know, the intelligence community has not taken them down. And Mark Udall, to some degree, is getting even more aggressive than Wyden, certainly on the torture side. In accusing, I mean, he all but accused John Brennan of lying in the hearing the other day, which I thought was fascinating. So, you know, the problem is that there's the committee. I mean, those committees are built to be captured, right? Both by the intelligence community. You know, it's kind of this club that you know all the secrets. Mike Rogers is terrible about this. He likes to keep the secrets, his committee's secrets, secret from even other Republicans, other people in the House. You know, he's very stingy about who he'll share his secrets with. The Senate side, both as a body and the Senate, you know, Dianne Feinstein's been better on that front at sharing secrets, but still, they're part of the club. It's a very powerful position. They don't want to mess with that, and so that's part of what makes them captured. Another one is donations from the. I mean, you know, there's another great book people should read. It's by Tim Shorrock. It's called Spies for Hire, and he really did. It was some of the early groundbreaking work on the role of contractors in the intelligence community. And if Booz Allen Hamilton runs this show, which they do, and they're donating a ton of money to the people on the oversight committees, how critical are they going to be? Yeah. I mean, and one of the things that, you know, Dianne Feinstein's legislation that was, I call it FISA-FICE, which basically it's only designed to kind of codify what already exists in these programs. One of the things she codified there was giving contractors access to the phone dragnet. Like, we've just had a contractor walk out with the NSA's crown jewels, and Dianne Feinstein turns around, and her response to that is to codify contractor access to some of the most sensitive data that the NSA has. What? You know, it's crazy, but that's you know, that's it's just crazy, but that's the kind of decision that gets made by these intelligence committees.
I guess there's a pessimism. How do you confront so many people? You have 215, 702, the executive order from Reagan's era. So you have all these different bodies of law. How do you get around this? How do you address all those components?
I also want to clarify. What I'm good at is the process side. Which is very distinct from the technical side, understanding the code level of what NSA is doing, which I'm not good at, but I read a lot about. So at least I think I sort of begin to grasp what they're doing, and I'd say that both of those are critical problems, and I think there's not enough technical expertise on the intelligence committees. Wyden and Udall in 2012, with the passage of the FISA Amendments Act, actually recommended having having kind of more formal technical reviews of these programs, and the rest of the committee shot it down. There's not enough technical expertise on the FISA court either. So whereas I think some of the judges on the FISA court know what I know, although they're protecting their kind of institutional concerns. Fewer of them know what the security researchers know as they're reading these NSA documents. So I just wanted to make it even more difficult.
Okay. So
but that's why I think Thomas Drake is important, because he was in a position that addressed both the policy issues and he knew the technical side.
When I say technical, I meant legal, I guess is the term I should have used. And the technical side is its own beast, and I respect that. But the legal side is what is disturbing, because you have so many pieces of law, and it seems like you have so many different ways to cheat a system that should be, I don't know. It just seems like it's really it's an issue of postmodernity or whatever you want to call it. and it's just
Well, it's about power more than, I mean, Jim Baker, who had been a key oversight person in Bush DOJ. He actually was the person who, for years, was kind of mandated by the FISA court to make sure that none of Bush's illegal program got into applications to the FISA court. And he's a well-meaning, I think he's got integrity. He's one of the people who is tied to the revolt in 2004. And he's actually just been brought back by Jim Comey as the general counsel of the FBI, which I actually take as a very good sign, because he's better than he's better than the woman who had been the counsel at the FBI by far. And I think he's more trustworthy to abide by the law. But in testimony to the P Club, he actually testified twice to the P Club, and he said, there are 8 different ways of getting phone metadata, 8 different legal means of getting phone metadata. And his message, I think, was in part that if you close down Section 215, we're going to go and get it via some other means. And they can get it via national security letter, frankly. So, and that's just one of many means. Jim Comey, the FBI director, said, if you require us to have court review on national security letters, we'll just get it with grand jury subpoena, which doesn't require that either. So, to some degree, the law does, the way the law is written, does provide, multiple means, and that's even before you consider the domestic versus foreign.
I mean, that just confirms, that just confirms all my thinking about this subject, which is that nothing's going to happen. But let me get into this next question because it's totally related.
Well, let me jump in and maybe provide at least where I find the really interesting. I mean, what I just described was about power as much as it was about law. Where in all of the past fights on internet policy we have succeeded, we have done so when Google got on board.
That's interesting.
And Google is no friend to privacy.
That's my point.
They are clearly no friend to privacy, but their business model is at tremendous risk right now. And I think the government co-ops companies, especially Microsoft, but Google has a tremendous amount of power. And I think that's where, aside from congressional investigation, I think, keep your eye on Google, because what they do, it's stunning to me. The Google Industries main lobbyist actually testified before the Senate Judiciary Committee, and he was ignored by people like Sheldon Whitehouse, who said, you're asking us to unilaterally disarm. And what a lot of NSA defenders don't understand is that U.S. power is based largely, the exercise of U.S. power globally is largely exercised through our preferential position on the telecom infrastructure and through our preferential position in the internet governance. So in other words, to the extent that you have an empire or global power, you need to own the communication devices. And we do that now. But NSA overreach has threatened a lot of kinds of backlash, which if they arise will make it a lot harder for us to be that empire, if that makes sense. And so I think that's, and I really think that's the motivation that drove the review group. I joke that Cass Sunstein never met a corporate interest he didn't like, and I sort of realized around about September when they reported that NSA was stealing from Google's cable in the UK. I realized that was going to bring Sunstein over to the civil libertarian side, because he would recognize it as a tremendous business risk, which I think he did, and that's what I don't think Obama gets yet. I don't think the NSA really cares, but that's the fight that's going to be interesting, because you have two Goliaths fighting each other, and we'll see who wins.
Those being
Google and the
national
NSA.
Security State.
Yeah, Google and the NSA are like beings. They have different motivations.
Sure.
The NSA clearly has a lot more legal oomph, but Google has weapons they can wield themselves. So we'll see.
So Thomas Drake has said, talked about he says, this is what he says. in a vocative article interview. There's a cult and culture of secrecy, corruption, cover-up, obstruction, and obfuscation deeply embedded in the NSA. End quote. He didn't say in the NSA. He didn't say it quite like that. In any case. And he calls for the dismantling of the NSA and its reconstitution. What do you think of that idea?
I would go bigger. What you said before is that that the government, you implied that Congress, and I would add the courts, don't really have control over what the NSA does. They don't have, one of the remarkable things that's in the background of this whole NSA discussion is this 6,000-page report that the Senate Intelligence Committee did, basically saying the CIA lied to us, lied to DOJ, lied to the White House on the torture program. And this whole time I've been saying, well, okay, Feinstein, your conclusion is that the CIA lied to you, lied to the White House, lied to DOJ. Why don't you also assume that the NSA lied to you, lied to the White House, and lied to DOJ? Because that's what the evidence actually points to. And there, there's a lot of different theorizing about the degree to which, and this was always sort of baked in, but the degree to which the national security state has been unmoored from the legal constraints binding it. So in other words, a new president comes in, and they really, to some degree in the last 50 years, have been dictated to by the national security establishment. Increasingly so, because it's gotten more and more powerful. And I think there are a lot of ways that happens. And so when Drake says, get rid of the NSA, I think you need to take a couple steps back and say, go to the National Security Act, go to the foundation of this national security state, and rethink and find some way to rein in, because it is the FBI as well, it is the CIA as well, it is big parts of DOD that are separate from NSA that have this authority to run kind of independently of the civilian constraints that operate them. So I shouldn't use civilian, that's the wrong term, but the legal and political constraints that are supposed to keep them in control. And then when you throw the big money in there, when you throw in the fact that these are all run by contractors, then it becomes all the more poisonous, because then it makes it really, really easy to buy Congress, which is what has happened recently.
So we talk about reconstituting the national security state. Realistically, I don't think that would happen without like some fundamentally scary, only in a fundamentally scary period in our history could things like that happen. I don't think it would just, do you think it could happen in sort of hey, let's be civil, let's change gears and let's rebuild this system. I think more likely would be people get totally frustrated, and I'm not calling for anything, but real ugly behavior, that just overwhelms the society.
Well, yes and no. They succeed in keeping us cowed, largely by saying, oh my gosh, scary terrorism. Oh my gosh, scary threats. Oh my gosh, they succeed by saying they perform an indispensable role that non-experts can't play in. And the threats that the cyber fearmongers talk about, they're going to take down the grid, which is possible, I think, would freak out Americans. Although, when the grid went down in 2003, ostensibly through physical means, it didn't freak us out. I lived through that, and I just got in the car and, dealt, and I had a gas stove, and it so long as it doesn't go on for 30 days, then people aren't going to panic.